afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NOVA 401k Associates webinar, Long-Term Part-Time Employees, Are You Ready? Today's webinar will be presented by Craig Hoffman, attorney and senior consultant here at NOVA. Craig has over 40 years of experience focusing exclusively on federal tax and ERISA matters relating to the design, implementation, and operation of tax-qualified retirement plans. This presentation is eligible for Texas CPA, ERISA, and ASPA CE. In order to receive a certificate of attendance, you must be registered individually, remain on the webinar for the entire presentation, and complete the survey that will pop up immediately following the close of the presentation. It does pop up in a separate window, so if you don't see it immediately on your screen, look to the bottom of your computer panel. Certificates will be sent via email within 1 week of the presentation. If for any reason you do not receive a certificate, please email us at webinars@nova401k.com and we'll be happy to assist. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available on our NOVA YouTube for future reference. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the questions box and Craig will answer them throughout, as well as at the end of the presentation as time allows. Craig, we are ready to get started.
All right, Andrea, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Good morning to those out west. Good afternoon to those in the middle and east, and welcome. Long-term part-time employees is an issue that has been around. It was part of the Secure Act that was enacted in 2019, but it became effective with the 2021 plan year, and we've been just kind of mulling along because it hasn't really kicked in and because of the 3-year eligibility. But time is drawing short, and believe it or not, amendments will soon be due for your operational compliance. So, good topic. We have a good bunch of people. I was looking through the registration list, and I saw a lot of familiar names. As you can see, I've spent a few years at various places doing this thing. I know there are many in the audience who I have known for many years. Welcome. For those who don't realize, I have found a home with my good friends at NOVA 401k Associates. I've known Karen Smith and the folks there for 25 years. They've given me a home as I've tried to kind of dial into this thing we call phased retirement, and I'm having a blast. It's a great place to work. We're always hiring, so if anybody feels inclined, by all means, feel free to contact me, and I'm happy to give you any information. What's really exciting for me, though, and it's hard to contain myself, is the newest member of my family. No, not a grandchild. I wish I could have one of them if my daughter would cooperate, but a new little doggy. Meet Perky. Perky is now a 4-month-old mini golden doodle. It's been 17, 18 years since I had a puppy. I forgot how trying those first 6 to 8 weeks can be, but she actually the last 2 nights slept 6 hours straight. So it's like a baby. And there she is, my little baby. So I'm very happy. Since I finally cut down my travel schedule, I have the ability to look after a 4-month-old puppy. Takes up a lot of time. All right, I digress. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We'll begin with a little background, talk about what the Secure Act did, and then we'll talk about how it works, the amendment deadlines, which I already alluded to, and various concerns that are still open right now about how this all will work. So, as you may recall, at the end of 2019, the Secure Act was passed by Congress. At the very end of the year, was appended to a government appropriations bill and buried. It was a must-pass piece of legislation, and oftentimes things get added to it, and Secure was added to it. Now, Secure was actually part of what was largely the Retirement Enhancement and Savings Act, RESA, which had bounced around Congress for about 4 years and finally got enacted as part of this bill. I raise that because Section 112 of Secure was added to the RESA package. It had not previously been part of that big bill. And the reason why I bring that up is that big bill, RISA, had been well vetted by interested stakeholders over many years. And so the little kinks in it tended to be worked out. The Secure Act, the long-term part-time employee provisions had not been vetted as well. It was a provision that Richie Neo, who is the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, was firmly behind, and it was, I'm sure at his behest, it was inserted in the bill. I raise that because you'll see there are some glitches, at least in my mind, that hopefully may be fixed. We'll talk about that as we go. So what did it do? It added a new subsection to Code Section 401K 2D. There is a second subsection, 401K 15, which has the majority of the verbiage in the rules, but together they add a new qualification requirement applicable to a 401K plan that it must cover certain long-term part-time employees. These became effective 1/1/21, but because eligibility service does not have to be counted for time prior to 1/1/21, nobody has entered as a long-term part-time employee, at least not mandatorily. And I'm not aware of anybody who has gone out of their way to bring them in sooner than the law mandates. So we've been looking at them entering the plan January 1, 2024, and that's why we've kind of, slept on some of this to date. So how does it work? To begin with, the law does not require an employer to adopt a 401K plan. There is, I should say, hanging out there, a bill, the Automatic Retirement Plan Act, which was inserted into the Build Back Better bill that came out of the House Ways and Means Committee. That would have, the Automatic Retirement Plan Act would have mandated employers must offer a 401K or a payroll deduction IRA program. That got dropped. Build Back Better still hasn't gone through. So I don't see that on the horizon anytime soon, but someday, someplace that may change. For now, the new law does not require that. What it requires is that if you choose to have a 401K plan, you must comply with these long-term part-time employee participation rules. And it's only applicable to K plans, not applicable to 403B, not applicable to 457, not applicable to simple IRAs. What the law does is define a long-term part-time employee as an employee who has been credited with at least 500 hours of service during 3 consecutive 12-month periods. Now, it doesn't really address what those 12-month periods would be. I mean, the initial belief would be if you're hired November 15th, it's the 3 12-month periods that begin November 15th, year 1, year 2, year 3, which is how we can run our rules for the 1 year of service requirement. But when you are applying the 1 year eligibility rules that are found not in 401K, but in Code Section 410, there is a specific provision that allows you to shift the eligibility computation period to the plan year for the second and subsequent years. And the vast majority of plans that I have worked with over the years do that shift. It makes it a lot easier administratively because you are tracking hours on a plan year basis, which typically you would need to do in any case for vesting purposes. What is not clear is whether the IRS will incorporate that same structure into the counting of the 3 consecutive 12-month periods. I attended the TEGE Joint Liaison Council meetings, an IRS virtual meeting in February, and I actually posed the question to Ron Trish, who is now in the Chief Counsel's office, as to whether this issue had been raised and whether guidance would be given He said the issue had been raised, but didn't promise how or whether it would be addressed. But the point being is, if you shift this eligibility computation period, when you're talking about 3 12-month periods, you are effectively reducing that 3-year period to as little as 25 months to as much as 35, 36. I have a case study to illustrate. There are exceptions. Certain employees do not have to be counted, or do not have to be included, even if they would meet the requirements for LTPT employees. There's an age requirement. You've got to be at least age 21 by the end of your 3rd computation period. Also, can be excluded are employees subject to a collective bargaining agreement where retirement benefits were the subject of good faith bargaining, as well as non-resident aliens with no U.S. source income. Remember that people confuse that all of the time. We have a lot of non-resident aliens here working in America, and they are earning U.S. source income. The non-resident U.S. source income typically applies if you're here in the States. It can even apply in some cases outside the States, but normally this exclusion would apply to a foreign employee who gets all of their income from a different country. The normal entry rules of 410A4 apply. They were specifically incorporated by reference into 401K 15, and that means the employee must enter the plan essentially on semi-annual entry dates. You know, we have the rule no later than the earlier of the first day of the plan year, date 6 months, yada, yada, yada. We all comply with that rule by having semi-annual or more frequent even than that entry dates, and that same rule will apply. You will have to enter the plan as a long-term part-time employee essentially within 6 months of satisfying the 3 consecutive 12-month periods. So here's an example, that case study that is intended to illustrate the computation period issue. We've got Billy's Bicycle Shop up in lovely Aspen, Colorado. They've got a 401k plan. They have a 1 year of service, age 21 requirement. Billy's his plan begins compliance with the rules in 2021. But they do elect not to count service for 12-month periods beginning before January 1, 2021, which I believe most plans will be doing. So we have this fellow Lance who used to ride bikes, and now at 49, he's looking for a little part-time work. And so he's got history in the bicycle industry, and he gets hired. And he starts December 30th, so he can work the New Year's holidays and make my hypothetical really work. And so December 2021, 30/21, he gets hired. And he works 3 consecutive 12-month periods in which he gets 600 hours of service. So we have semi-annual entry dates, which really doesn't matter that much here. The question is, when would Lance be eligible to participate? Well, assume the plan does not shift to the plan year after the first eligibility computation period. Well, that means Lance, his first 12-month period ends on 12/29/2022, the third in 2023, and the third ends on December 29th, 2024. So he enters on the next entry date, January 1, 2025. Bingo, works 3 years. Well, what if we shifted the eligibility computation period? Well, his first 500-hour 12-month period would end December 29th, 2022. But then we shift to the 2022 plan year, and lo and behold, he gets a second year of credit. For the plan year ending December 31, 2022, he gets a third year credit for the plan year ending December 31, 2023, and lo and behold, Lance now enters the plan January 1, 2024, a full year earlier than if we had not shifted eligibility computation periods. I don't know where this is going to play out. We have had meetings at NOVA on this, on trying to determine how this will work in terms of, is it going to be easier to try and plot 12-month periods based on anniversary dates going forward? You can do that for vesting as well if you wanted to. What we will have to see is Irs guidance. Irs, their guidance plan, they publish semi-annually. The latest one has a marker saying that proposed regs on Secure Act matters are due out in March of 2022, this year. I was hoping, though I didn't really expect it, I was hoping they would be out before this webinar, but alas, that date is more of an aspirational goal. And so we're going to have to get some questions answered, and that's kind of the problem with trying to get into the compliance mode for these new rules. Another question that has arisen that will need to ultimately be answered by the IRS. I have my own opinion, which I will share, but the question is whether a long-term part-time employee can be excluded on the basis of being in a classification of employees who are not eligible to participate. It is not unusual for a big company to have a plan under which the employees who work in Division A are eligible, but not the employees who work in Division B. If we exclude Division B employees, but there's some long-term part-time employees in that division, are we required to bring them in the plan because there are employees, even though they're in a division that is not eligible? I don't know the answer. I do firmly believe the answer is yes. Well, maybe I better make sure what the question is I'm answering. The question is yes, you can exclude them. No, those long-term part-time employees in Division B should not need to be covered if they're in a class of employees who are otherwise ineligible. There is one very important caveat. The classification must not be one that has the effect of imposing an age or service condition, as prohibited by the regs cited on the bullet on the slide. And that reg has been on the books for years and years and has been applied in the context of the 1 year of service requirement, but I firmly believe it would likely be applied in the same manner in the long-term part-time employees. So that, for example, if going back to our AB company with 2 divisions, what if, and this is odd, I grant you, but what if to be employed in the B division, you have to work first in Division A for 5 years? And only Division B has a plan. Well, isn't that a de facto eligibility requirement that you must work for this company at least 5 years before you have a chance to get into the plan? The answer is yes. The regs show, the reg have a couple of examples. One is of a plan that requires you to have, you must have a driver's license 15 years. And now I live in Florida, and down here I think the kids start driving at 13, but 13 plus 15 still gets you to 28. So that's what they're getting at. And yes, still at the end of the day, I'm not the IRS. We will have to see what the guidance, I expect the guidance will address it. We'll talk a little bit later. The IRS put out a notice 2020-68 mid part of 2020 to give some initial guidance. And in there, they asked for comments. And we at NOVA wrote a comment letter. I know ARA wrote a comment letter. And I think both of our letters and others raised this issue and asked for guidance. So we know who has to be in. What do they get? What they get is the ability to make elective deferral contributions. That's it. They are not required to receive any matching contributions, even if the plan provides for matching contributions for the regular employees. You are not required to auto-enroll long-term part-time employees, although Secure 2.0 has a provision that would require all 401k plans on a going-forward basis apply auto-enrollment, but that's not law yet. Long-term part-time employees are not required to receive any top-heavy minimums. So the only thing you need to do is give them the opportunity to make an elective contribution to the plan. Now, if you want to, if the plan sponsor would like to make contributions for the long-term part-time employees, they can do that. And they can do so without fear it will somehow, no good deed goes unpunished. Because, and what I mean by that, even if you give them a contribution, you can exclude them when you do your non-discrimination testing. You can exclude them when you do your coverage testing. You can exclude them when you do your ADP, HCP testing for both elected deferrals and matching contributions. You can exclude them from safe harbor contributions, and as I already said, top-heavy minimums as well. It's permissive. You do not have to exclude them. It's possible in some circumstance they might help, but nevertheless, they can't hurt you. They can only help you in your testing under the way the law is written. What happens if an employee who got in as a long-term part-time employee ends up working more hours and he or she gets into the plan? They've completed as a regular employee. They've completed the year of service requirement the plan might be applying. Well, at that point, they cease to be covered by the special long-term part-time employee rules in almost all areas except one, and I'll come back to that. So once they get into the plan as a regular standard employee, they no longer can be excluded for purposes of coverage and non-discrimination and ADP testing. They have to be eligible for employer contributions in accordance with the terms of the plan, and they would be entitled to top-heavy minimum benefits if the plan is top-heavy, and they're there at the end of the year. How it works vesting. Now, this is the one place where long-term part-time employee status lives on even after you become a full-time employee. Well, Craig, you told me we don't have to make any contributions for these folks. Why do we have to worry about vesting? Well, you're right. If these employees never get a non-elective contribution, or if the plan only has elective deferrals, then vesting is not an issue. But that employee may at some point in time complete 1,000 hours and come into the plan and receive employer contributions, even if they're not otherwise made for employees who have only achieved the status of long-term part-time employee. So there clearly is a potential for application of vesting to a long-term part-time employee, and special rules apply for these individuals who come into the plan on this basis. They must receive a year of vesting credit for any vesting computation period in which they are credited with at least 500 hours of service. That rule is only applicable to participants who are eligible to participate solely on the basis of being a long-term part-time employee. The other employees continue to be subject to the 1,000-hour rule if they got in the plan on some basis other than the long-term part-time employee requirements. Well, what happens if that long-term part-time employee completes a year of service? They go into the plan, as we already said. They become regular participants, except with regard to vesting. The vesting rules specifically say that the at least 500 hours of service requirement continues to apply to any employee who became eligible solely on the basis of being a long-term part-time employee. So that means these long-term part-time employees will receive favored status for vesting for the rest of their career. And to make matters worse, the vesting credit. You can vesting 1, 2, 3. You are not permitted to exclude service prior to January 1st, 2021 for purposes of vesting. And notice 2020-68, which I mentioned to you, did specifically answer that question. There was some hope that maybe some way, somehow, the IRS could read the statute differently. And as I mentioned, comment letters were filed. We filed ours and suggested, well, let me back up. One of the reasons the IRS asked for comments was they recognized how burdensome some of these provisions would be, and they asked for suggestions on how to make it less burdensome. NOVA suggested a cutoff date of not having to look back prior to 2016. Empower, the big financial services company, they had a creative letter that said they didn't think that the rule had to be read that strictly and that you could read it to still exclude service prior to 1/1/21. I give them credit for their moxie, but I don't read the statute. It's pretty darn clear. So what this means is Congress really did not consider the administrative burdens. And this is one of the glitches in my mind that got through the mix because this wasn't vetted. I do not know why this vesting was singled out to continue to apply after you become a full-time employee. Bear with me for a second. All right, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Back up. So, assuming the plan excludes service prior to 2021 for eligibility, the first time an employee is eligible would be 1/1/24, and somebody was hired before January 1, 2021. That employee, when they come into the plan, would be immediately entitled to a year of vesting credit for any prior computation period in which they had 500 hours of service after you apply the break-in service rule. And I think plans should be able to access that data, which should have been kept on the 500-hour standard for purposes of break-in service rules anyhow. Whether it was or not, I don't know. But this is the challenge that we're going to be facing in applying these vesting rules. Now, there is some hope. The RISE Act, the Retirement Improvement and Savings Act. No, it's no pension legislation is worth a darn unless it has a good acronym. So the Rise Up Act is actually companion legislation to Secure 2.0 as passed by the Ways and Means Committee. It was passed by the House Education and Labor Committee because they have jurisdiction over Title I of ERISA labor rules. And they made some minor modifications to Secure 2.0. The bad news, Secure 2.0, and the RISE Act still does this, drops the number of consecutive 12-month periods to bring in a long-term part-time employee from 3 to 2. And that's effective as if originally included in Secure, if it goes through that way. It's a long way before it's actually law. But second, though, the good news is the RISE Act would specifically allow plans to exclude crediting service for vesting purposes for service credited before 1/1/21. So that would be a good thing. We'll see how it turns out. I'm doing next week a webinar for NIPA. You got to pay for that one, but not if you're a NIPA member, actually, now I think about it, on the legislative update. So meet me there next week, and we can talk about where Secure 2.0 may be going in the weeks and months ahead. So are there some ways to deal with long-term part-time employees that we might want to consider? Well, one would be for vesting and all of the rules, they only apply to plans to a participant who enters the plan solely on the basis of being a long-term part-time employee. Well, what if the plan's more liberal and allows everybody in after a month of service? And a lot of plans do that, at least for elective deferrals. If you do that, there will never be anybody who enters the plan solely on the basis of being a long-term part-time employee. So that may be one way to deal with these rules. It does have a downside. That's just setting forth the whole standard. What's the downside? The downside is those employees, you would not be able to use these special rules that apply exclusively, that allow you to exclude long-term part-time employees. So you would have to consider them in the coverage test, but they would be what we refer to as otherwise excludable employees, which could allow you to do your permissive disaggregation coverage testing. So that may not be an issue. Similarly, you can use permissive disaggregation to do your ADP testing the standard group of people who have satisfied a year of service and those people you let in who have not gotten a year but have got in on the month, only a month after you get hired. And again, permissive disaggregation could be used for if it's a safe harbor plan to avoid contribution. So those work out. The one real detriment is if the plan is top heavy, because the top heavy rules would continue to apply to that person even though they're otherwise excludable. There is a provision in Secure 2.0 or Portman Cardin or both that would finally allow disaggregation of top heavy otherwise excludable employees for top heavy minimums, but that's not law yet. So if that becomes law together, this may be one way to avoid it. And at the end of the day, Congress would be happy. The whole goal is to allow some of, the payroll, workplace payroll deduction savings programs are 15 more times more likely for employees to save than if they don't have a workplace savings arrangement, and a demographic of about 30 to 50,000. This is based on an old Irs study. So that's what we're looking at. Make it easy for them to save. So let's talk about the Central Perk coffee shop, another iconic location where we all see the gang hanging out. I can't remember all their names. Anyhow, it's a 401k profit sharing plan established 1/1/2011. Calendar year, eligibility is year of service, age 21. Entry dates 1/1/71, but they really don't matter in this case because we've made the hypothetical very easy to follow. The plan allows for elected deferrals, has discretionary match and discretionary profit sharing, but that only goes to employees who enter the plan other than as a long-term part-time employee. The matching and profit are subject to a vesting schedule, and it's a 6-year graded. So we've got 3 part-time employees, Rachel, Monica, and Phoebe. All were hired on January 1, 2018. I know we don't find that in the real world, but makes my life easier. We're not focusing on shifting eligibility computation periods because if you're hired January 1, it doesn't matter. So here we see all 3 started in 2018. They've had different hours worked over the years, and now we get to the current time frame. And the question first asked is, when will the long-term part-time employee requirements apply to Central Perk? And the answer is they are already applicable. They began last year, 1/1/21. Well, assuming service credited before January 1, 2021 is not counted for long-term part-time eligibility purposes, what's the earliest date? Phoebe, Monica, or what's the other one? I'll show how much Monica, Phoebe, and Rachel. My wife has that on as just noise, white noise in the background, and as I walk back through our bedroom at times. Anyhow, so I don't watch it that much anymore. Yeah, I digress. All right. So when do they get in? January 1, 2024, if they have 3 consecutive 12-month periods with 500 hours. Then that's the next question. Well, that was the earliest date. When actually will they get in? Well, if we look at Rachel worked 500 hours in 18 and 19, but those years don't count. They're before 2021. So we look at 2021, and Rachel had 500 hours in 21, 22, and 23. She gets in 1/1/24. Monica, again, we can ignore her service before 2021, and we see her first 500-hour year after 2021 was 22, 23, 24. She gets in 1/1/25. Obviously, then we go to Phoebe, and she didn't start working 500-hour years to 23. And so she gets in, she finishes at the end of 25, would enter the first entry date thereafter, 1/1/26. Pretty straightforward. What if Central Perk decides to make a discretionary contribution for 2024 plan year? Do Rachel, Monica, or Phoebe need to share in the contribution? Well, Monica and Phoebe aren't even in the plan yet, so that's no problem there. But Rachel, no, does not need to. She is in solely on the basis of being a long-term part-time employee. However, if we scroll forward to the 2025 plan year, lo and behold, in 24, Rachel got a year of 1,000 hours in, got a year of service, and enters the plan as a no longer as a standard employee participant on 2025, and so she would have to share in that year's contribution. Can Central Perk permit long-term part-time employees to share, in this case, Rachel to share in the discretionary contribution in 2024? The answer is yes. Would they? If so, how do the ADP, ACP, 401A4, 410B, top-heavy apply? We get to exclude those employees when we do our testing, if we chose to allow Rachel in for the 2024 plan year. May Central Perk permit part-time employees to participate early than 3 consecutive years? Yes. If they are eligible to make elective deferrals after being employed for 6 months and therefore are not entering the plan solely on the basis of being a long-term part-time employee, how do the rules apply? I believe they don't apply at all. And I expect Irs Guidance will confirm that, but in my mind, it's a no-brainer. I don't see how they can reach any other result. So that gets back to that might be a design alternative. Well, what if they are entitled, what if they get a discretionary contribution? What would be their vesting percentage in that contribution? Again, if we're talking about the 2024 plan year, the only person who's in the plan is Rachel, unless we let them in sooner. She got 500 hours in 18 and 19. She only had 1 year break in service, so she didn't lose that. So she's got 3 years by 2021, 4 years by 2022, 6 by, he's got 3, 4, 5, and finally 6 years in 2024 on a 6-year graded vesting schedule. That's 100%. As we look at Monica and Phoebe, we can see likewise how they go forward in their vesting credit when they reach 6 years. We don't know when Phoebe might make it to 100%. We don't have any data for 2026. But again, this points out that we've got to go back before 2021 to credit vesting for Rachel, Monica, but not Phoebe because she never had a 500-hour year. What if it's a safe harbor plan? It's the same as the discretionary contributions. We can exclude the long-term part-time employees if we wish to do so. What if Central Perk provides for automatic enrollment? It's up to Central Perk. The plan should provide whether the LTPT employees will or will not be subject to automatic enrollment. I guess it begs the question, can you automatic enroll standing employees but not long-term part-time? I think so, since they can be excluded for 401A4 testing. Do you want to exclude them if you otherwise have automatic enrollment? Probably not. But in any case, it's up to the plan and plan language as to how auto enrollment might be applied to long-term part-time employees. There is no mandate under Secure. Whether that changes in the future due to future laws remains to be seen. What if Central Perk has a location in Brooklyn and the full-time employees, all employees at the Brooklyn location are excluded from being eligible to be in the Central Perk plan? They do it different in Brooklyn. We don't need to cover them in our plan. We can otherwise pass coverage. Would that be okay? And I think the answer is that should be okay if it is not otherwise some kind of disguised age or service condition. Well, then we go to the second part of this question. What if it was a disguised service condition, i.e., in order to be able to work in Manhattan, the Plum location, you first have to work at least 5 years at the Brooklyn location. Now, I know this is a convoluted fact pattern, but stay with me. In that case, we would effectively be saying, in order to be in the plan, in order to work in Manhattan, you've got to have 5 years of service. That would be a disguised age and service. That wouldn't be permissible, and it certainly wouldn't be, permissible if the classification was unduly made up of long-term part-time employees, for example. And I think that's where the guidance will come out. Amendment deadlines. I alluded to this. There is a remedial amendment period that all of Secure is subject to. This is just one element of it. The plans are permitted to be operated in accordance with this new law, provided the amendment reflecting how the plan was operated is adopted by the end of this remedial amendment period. That deadline for conforming amendments is generally the 2022 plan year, though governmental plans and collectively bargained plans generally have until the end of the 2024 plan year. And it's important that that Secure Act good faith amendment reflect how the plan was operated, and ultimately that's going to have to be put into your next cycle 4, I guess. DC document will be on by then. We're finishing up cycle 3, and it's not there, I assure you. And it's now March. We've got 9 months to do these amendments, and I know a lot of folks have already started doing them. There is, I'm not sure if it's good news or bad news, the Secure 2.0 will also require plan amendments. And what it does is actually delay the Secure 1.0, this deadline, another year. And that may go even another year. In other words, right now, Secure 2.0 says plans need to be amended by the remedial amendment period by the end of the 2023 plan. That was written last year when it thought it might pass last year. If it gets enacted toward the end of this year, they may string it out to 2024. And what Secure does in any case is tie in the Secure Act 1.0 and the CARES Act amendments to the same deadline as Secure 2.0. We'll see how that plays out. Concerns. Yeah, there are a lot of concerns. We need guidance. And I know a lot of the document providers are screaming for guidance. A lot of the administration companies are anxiously awaiting guidance. As I said, it's due out this month. There's still, what's today, the 22nd, there's still 8-9 days left in the month. And so there are questions besides some I've already alluded to. For example, will we be able to use the equivalency methods to credit service for vesting and eligibility? You know, right now, if you want to, you can give an employee a set number of hours if they work 1 hour within a specified period of time. So if they work 1 hour in a day, they get 10 hours for that day. 1 hour in a week, they get 45 hours for that week. It's a estimate, if you will, but makes it not necessary to count actual hours. And the question is, will plans be able to use this for purposes of the 12-month computation periods as well as for vesting? I meant the eligibility periods as well as the vesting computation periods. I don't know. And actually, are you shooting yourself in the foot by doing so? Because this is being used for a part-time person. Shouldn't you be able to credit half the time you might otherwise credit? So instead of 45 hours, 22 and a half? I don't know. That was, again, a point made in several comment letters, including Nova's, and I think ARA's as well. How will the new rules apply to church and grandfathered governmental 401k plans? The grandfathered plans had to have been adopted before May 7, 86. 86. Some of you may not have been born on that grandfather date, but I was already started down my 40-year path. In any case, there are a few governmental K plans still out there, believe it or not, and I think the rules will apply, but we'll find out. Another concern, the 5,500. Will these long-term part-time employee participants be counted in determining whether you're a large plan, which is required to have an independent audit? And the answer is yes, they will count. Don't kill the messenger. But there is a ray of hope. Right now, the 5,500 rules provide that if you are eligible to make an elective contribution, even if you don't make it, even if you've got $0 in the plan, you still count for that independent audit threshold. The DOL in September of last year proposed amendments to the 5,500 forms and instructions, and one of them to be effective for the 2022 plan year, this current year, is that you would no longer have to count active participants who are not active, i.e. participants who have a 0 account balance. And it remains to be seen, but one might guess that many long-term part-time employees may have 0 account balances. And I believe that rule change will go through. There were comment letters written. Understandably, there was pushback by the CPA community suggesting that the world would come to an end if we didn't audit every plan. There was clearly some kind of advocacy campaign. There were several dozen letters, all with the same format, and it was clear what was going on. I think they'll change it. They actually proposed that change back in 2016 in the modernization project that was put on hold. We'll find out. They should finalize the 22 instructions sometime, probably late spring, early summer. If the plan is not top heavy, as I've alluded to, it may make sense to lower the service requirement for elective contributions so that no participant is eligible solely on the basis of being a long-term part-time employee. Again, the IRS will need to confirm. The other, again, the Build Back Better plan would have included originally the Automatic Retirement Plan Act that would have required all employers to sponsor a K plan, 403B, simple IRA, or an IRA payroll deduction savings program. That desire, I mean, that mandate is a priority of Richie Neal, who is the chairman, Democratic congressman and chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. It is not bipartisan. Many Republicans continue to oppose anything that has the word mandate in it. It may someday come to pass. If it doesn't, what we are seeing is many states are taking it up on their own, including Connecticut, California, Oregon, and Illinois are already rolled out plans or in the process of rolling it out this year. I will tell you this, in all of those other jurisdictions that or the states that are putting in mandates, they all have an exemption if you have a 401k plan. So there are a lot of good ways to sell 401k plans in those states without a mandate. And so at the end of the day, unfortunately, we will need more guidance. I fully expect to do a update webinar when we get the guidance sometime probably in the summer. But otherwise, I appreciate the attendance here. This webinar was one Karen Smith asked me to do for our NOVA staff. We are very proactive with our staff in doing training. It's one of the reasons they hired me. And so we decided we open it up to everybody out there to get a taste of the good things we do here at NOVA. So we appreciate you taking part. Andrea, do we have any questions? I may try and look at my chat box now.
We do. We've got about 7 questions. So I think we can probably cover those over the next 10, 15 minutes. The first one, are the long-term part-time rules applicable to profit-sharing plans?
No, it's got to have a 401k feature. Only plans, it's a qualification requirement for the CODA. So it's in 401k2D, which deals with having a qualified cash or deferred arrangement. So it does not have to be applied to a profit-sharing plan. Next.
The next one is a scenario. We have a solo K with 2 partners, each work over 1,000 hours annually. None of the staff works more than 800 hours in a 12-month period. Much of the staff works, though, more than 500 hours each year. If this holds true, can this plan still be a solo K in 2024?
No. You're going to have to bring in the long-term part-time employees. Sorry, I can't. Don't kill the messenger, but it will become subject to ERISA when those participants enter the plan. Next.
What if a plan had liberal eligibility requirements and long-term part-time, sorry, another question popped up. Here we go. What if a plan had liberal eligibility requirements and long-term part-time employees were already eligible? Can you disregard them for testing purposes? What plan year would that be effective if yes?
If you have anybody who gets into the plan on a basis other than being a long-term part-time employee, i.e. somebody got in the plan before they completed 3 consecutive 12-month periods with 500 hours. If that's the case, the ability to exclude them for testing is not available. The normal rules we have had on the books since the 80s, allowing us to disaggregate for testing in the otherwise excludable employees, which are generally the employees who have not satisfied age 21 and a year of service, but are in the plan. Those can be permissively disaggregated, and that testing regime should be close to duplicating what you would have with the long-term part-time employees. The one exception is if the plan is top-heavy, in which case those people are, even though they're otherwise excludable, they nevertheless will be entitled to a top-heavy minimum if they're an active participant on the last day of the year. Next.
If the plan excludes vesting in the document prior to age 18 or the initial plan effective date, can those years still be excluded for the long-time part-time employees?
That's a good question. And it actually is the first time anybody's ever raised that to me. And so I will caveat my response because I haven't specifically looked at it, but I believe those standard vesting rules would continue to apply. The only thing different for the long-term part-time employee is that he or she gets a year of credit for a year with at least 500 hours instead of at least 1,000 hours. But I believe you would still be able to exclude service prior to 18 or the plan effective date if you chose to do so.
Will documents need to be amended to clarify that safe harbor, employer match, and or profit sharing excludes long-term part-time employees from those contributions if the employer chooses to exclude them?
I believe that would be a very prudent thing to do because that's part of the operational. Now, with that said, nobody's in yet. So, I mean, you may do your Secure Act amendment by 2022 and can still do an amendment in 2023 to further clarify that you haven't operated outside of being in accordance with it. And I don't know if the document, I once was a document provider in a prior life, my good days at SunGuard way back when, and Reliance, and Corbell, actually, for those who really want to go back. But I would guess the document providers will at some point have a remedial amendment that has sort of checked the box as to how those rules will be applied. It is a good faith amendment, so I'm not sure how the good faith amendments ultimately will play out, but I dare say for the Cycle 4 DC plans, there will be check boxes in which you indicate what contributions long-term part-time employees would be eligible to receive, if any.
Can a plan avoid including long-term part-time employees if they have an HCE exclusion for the plan?
No, sorry. Again, this is aimed not at discrimination per se, but the idea that gig workers, part-time workers need a place that they will save more if they have a workplace savings arrangement. So this is about coverage, not about discrimination.
How will the eligibility requirements be applied if the plan uses elapsed time?
I don't know. That was one of my questions. Good question. I have the same one. I think let me back up. I take that back. I talked about the hours route. I think you can use elapsed time. I think, was the question elapsed time or equivalency?
Elapsed time.
Yeah, I think you can use elapsed time, but I'm not sure how that would work. I think you will. I don't know. It's a good question. Let me back to my original point is I do not know for sure the answer to that question. I think you probably could, but I'm not sure how the standard would work in that context. So something worth looking for in the guidance, but that one I am going to say I'm not sure.
All right, just a few more. If the 5,500 participant count changes to exclude participants with no account balance, does the count still need to go below 100 to no longer require an audit?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure what the questioner is getting at. I mean, the standard rules will apply where if you're 100 or more, you need an audit. Less than that, you don't. With the caveat of the 80-120 rule where you can elect to continue to file as a small plan if you don't go above 120 or what have you. But ultimately, you will, I think you can still use, those 80-120 rule, but at the end of the day, you're going to have fewer than 100 of participants who are counted. If you have 100 or more, you'll need an audit. And so I think I answered the question.
All right, it looks like we have 3 more questions. If you have any more questions, you can go ahead and submit those and we can do.
I'll try to get back to you. No absolute promise, but I generally am able to get back to people. So do send your questions to our Know the Webinar address. which Andrea
Yes,
will give you
we'll go ahead and cover the,
before we hang up.
yes, we'll go ahead and cover, do you still want to go over the last 3 questions, Craig?
Yeah, we'll do those, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, again, if you have any questions, though, that come up after the webinar, if you have any questions about CE, future webinar topics that we host, please feel free to visit our website, nova401k.com, and check out future webinar topics that are upcoming. We do have one this Thursday, actually, on common 401k errors that come up, missed deferral opportunities, late deposits, all that good stuff. But please feel free to email webinars@nova401k.com, and we'll be happy to help you. Next question. Just to confirm, if a safe harbor plan does not give the safe harbor contribution to the long-term part-time employees, they are no longer exempt from the top-heavy minimum.
Read that again, please.
If a safe harbor plan does not give the safe harbor contribution to the long-term part-time employees, they are no longer exempt from the top-heavy minimum.
No, I'm not sure that's not correct. Let me just say what the rule is. In a safe harbor 401k plan, you will have to bring in a long-term part-time employee when he or she has 3 consecutive 12-month periods of 500 hours. That long-term part-time employee is not required to receive a safe harbor contribution. You can choose to give him one or not give him one. Either way, though, if that person is in the plan solely on the basis of being a long-term part-time employee, they do not have to receive a top-heavy minimum. It's only when they cross the threshold to reach the full participant status that they would now be entitled to top-heavy minimums. 1 more, 2 more.
We have many plans that have a part-time, temporary, seasonal employee exclusion, needing 1 year of service to enter the plan, and other plans that have eligibility for full-time and a different eligibility for part-time that is usually, again, 1 year of service. This long-term part-time rule would override each of those situations, correct?
That is correct. I mean, keep in mind that your language that says you exclude part-time and seasonal employees has woven within it a fail-safe provision that says, God forbid, one of these part-time or seasonal employees actually gets a year of service, they've got to come in the plan. So the long-term part-time employee rules will clearly override it. You basically have a year of service plan with just more liberal eligibility for a certain class of people. And at the end of the day, the long-term part-time employees will have to come into the plan irrespective of not being able to satisfy the condition in that rule. It's going to be confusing, frankly, to have a summary plan description that has that wording in it. So you may want to consider how you're going to describe how the rule works on a going forward basis. Because essentially, what you can say is long-term part-time employees get in for elected deferrals, but only when you complete a year of service will you be eligible for whatever other contribution.
All right, our last question. For vesting, the non-long-term part-time employees would still have to follow the normal hours required for vesting, usually 1,000, but the long-term part-time employees would vest each year under only 500 hours of service, correct?
That is absolutely correct. I don't have a rational explanation for it, to be honest. But, a logical rationale why they made that distinction. But it is what it is, and nothing in Secure 2.0 changes that. The only thing it does is allow you to exclude vesting prior to 1/1/21 for crediting, but it does not change any other the mechanics of the vesting rule. Well, again, folks, thank you very much for joining us. I hope we will continue to do these. Follow my page on LinkedIn, as well as follow the Nova 401k Associates LinkedIn page, and you'll be sure to see when we announce future webcasts, as well as I publish some articles on there from time to time. And we'd love for you to participate and follow us. Andrea, go ahead and take us away.
All right. Well, like Craig said, thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate it. We do have the presentation made available as a PDF. If you look at your GoToWebinar panel, there is a handout dropdown. Just click the PDF and you should be able to download that and save that onto your local computer. This presentation again was recorded and will be made available on our NOVA YouTube channel. It should be available there tomorrow. There's also other webinars that we've had in the past that are available. If you would like a certificate of attendance today for CE, whether that is Texas CPA, IRPA, ASPA, please make sure to complete the pop-up survey that will pop up immediately at the closing of the webinar. Do make sure that you answer yes to needing credit. Our CE certificates are automated, so if you don't answer yes to one of the questions, you don't automatically receive a certificate. But of course, if you have any questions, please reach out to us at webinars@nova401k.com. Thank you, everyone.
Says goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye. Have a great day.